Good morning.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. See, like we still got some people coming in. Give them one more minute to start.
Mm.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. We should go ahead and start. Today, we're going to be talking about professionalism and ethics, laws and regulations, and governance. Before we start our presentation today, just a quick couple quick updates. This course is self-reported, so please make sure that you go into the ACHE portal and put in this course name with the correct start date and end date. So we started in 10/3 and we'll be going through for 2 more weeks until November 1st. And without further ado, I'll introduce one of our presenters today, um, Richard. He is a professor with the California State University of Chicago, attorney at law. He's a founding member of the Treasury for CAHL and Board of Government Exam faculty since 2014. His, uh, his awards include Senior Executive Award, President and Regents Award, CAHL Volunteer of the Year, and HEC Distinguished Service Award. All right, turn it over to you, sir.
Well, good morning, but can I clarify? I'm at Cal State Chico, not Chicago. It's cold enough here. I definitely don't want to be there. Um, Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to be hitting two subjects. The first is professionalism and ethics, and then afterwards I'll do the legal section. Um, I think professionalism ethics is one that gets a lot of attention on the tests that we don't necessarily really pay a lot of attention to other than that. I assume we all pay attention to being ethical, but we don't necessarily look at the code of ethics and the ethics statements as much as maybe we should. So that ought to be one of your key things is make sure you're familiar with the code of ethics. You don't have to memorize it by any means, but one good trick there is that it's divided up into, I think it's six parts, duties or responsibilities to the organization, responsibilities to patients, responsibility to employees. Make sure you're familiar with those and you can kind of slot things in, and I think that will help. They do look at other codes of ethics as well. So briefly, uh, American Medical Association, American Nurses Association, um, what rights patients have generally outside of our code of ethics, and then ethics committees. I think those are the areas that you probably want to concentrate on in preparing for this. But remember, ACHE does have, besides the code of ethics, it's got a bunch of ethics statements that are probably worth scanning as well, and they're up there on the ACHE website. So when we go to the next slide, next slide. Okay, so here is our first question. It's an ethics committee question. So I'm going to do that brain walking that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And I'm pretending that I've never seen these questions again. And just to let you know, I did not prepare. Okay, so yes, I've seen these in past sessions, but I haven't looked at them recently. And that means one is I really have to figure out the answer. And two is there's a chance I'll get them wrong, which is okay because it shows that you don't need to get 100% right to pass the test. So looking at the first question, I'm trying to figure out what they're asking. So primary task of an ethics committee is to. So, okay, I got to know about ethics committees. And I'm looking at that word primary task, and that tells me that there may be more than one correct answer in terms of what does an ethics committee do, but I'm looking for the primary one, the one that's most important. And that means it's a little bit of judgment. So I'm going to do the true false. Arbitrate conflicting decisions by caregivers. Well, no, I know that one's wrong. They do not arbitrate anything. They mediate, but they don't get to make the decision. So that's a false. Develop the organization's ethics plan. Certainly they're involved in it. They might be the lead in it, so that's a maybe. Um, Act as the surrogate body for regular decision makers. Well, again, no, ethics committee does not make decisions. They advise, they help you make decisions, but they don't do it. So I've got a false, a maybe, a false, and the fourth one is formulate policy and educate hospital personnel about health care ethics in general. And that's definitely one of their roles. So B and C are both true, and I'm trying to decide which one is their primary one. And it's almost like flipping a coin for me right now, and I've got 50-50 instead of 1 out of 4, which is better. But I think that formulating policy and educating people is probably more of their day-to-day role. So I'm going to go with D, but B might be right. So I'm going to go D though. Oh, that was literally flipping a coin. Okay, let's go to number 2. The major purpose, again, I've got that word major, so it's not the only one. The major purpose of a code of ethics for members of a healthcare executive association. Wonder who that association is. The major purpose of the code of ethics is to, well, yeah, it does provide guidance to members in their own conduct. That's probably the biggest thing. So that's definitely a true, maybe true with a star next to it. Increase public understanding? I don't think so. Providing a framework for disciplining members. It does do that. There's a section on what happens if you break the rules, but that is that's certainly not its major purpose. It's more preventive, not discipline. Provide a framework for annually evaluating. No, that's HR. That's not ethics here. So I'm going to go with A. And the answer is it is A. All right, let's do number 3. Okay, the ethical precepts. So we're getting a little theory here. The ethical precepts, organizational philosophy. I'm going to cross out organizational philosophy in my mind. I don't need that. The ethical precepts that guide the organization's activities are found in a variety of sources. So we're looking for the sources. Okay, that's really what I need is the sources. So reflected in everyday actions. Yeah, I guess. Sole province of senior management, not at all. Part of the governing board's formal actions. Yes, sort of. Again, both A and C are sort of. D is definitely true that ethics is found by what goes on around us. It's found in policy. So C actually becomes part of D in that sense. A becomes part of C in that sense, D. So D includes both everyday actions and formal actions. So I'm going to go with D. Next slide. Oh, yeah. Human subjects research. Okay. Which of the following conditions must be met? Must be met. So I'm looking for an absolute for human subjects to be used in medical research. I don't know a lot about medical research. I try to avoid it. I try to avoid research that involves humans at all. No suitable animal model exists. Yeah, I think in the early stages, but certainly not when we get to the clinical level. Research program has been approved by the medical staff. No, they don't do it. That's false. Research program has been approved by the governing authority. Not, they can't approve every single research project. That sounds false. And risk should be clearly explained in understandable language. Yeah, that is the basics of research ethics that if you're using people, you got to explain to them what it is that they're they're agreeing to. So I'm going to go with D, which it looks like some of the people in the chat have gone with D as well. So let's see if it's D. It is D. Which of the following are commonly recognized? So that's kind of a fluffy word. Commonly recognized means I can't look it up in the law or anything. That's true for ethics. So we're saying, what do we culturally recognize to be a right of each patient? Oh, except I got the negative. I almost missed it. So all of these except one, I'm looking for the false. Okay, so should patients receive considerate and respectful care? I think we could probably all think of hospitals that don't, but yeah, they should. Um, access protective services. I would guess that's a right. Communicate with a caregiver in the language of the patient's choosing. Now that I would think might be a right, but I'm not sure if it's commonly recognized. And this is an example of I want to make sure I'm looking in general principles here. I'm not looking at California law. Um, so I think C is probably going to be it. Let's look at D though. Be informed about and participate in decisions. Yeah, autonomy. That's number one. If there's one rule that's there, I would say that's probably it. So A is a right, B is a right, D is a right. I think C is not commonly recognized. Since we got the negative here, I'm going to go with C, and it is. And it looks like the chat we had some B's, and I can't see if we had a G. I'm not sure where that one came in. Um, so yeah, the B was my second runner-up here. Um, but but I think that that if you're getting abused and you want to call someone, that's probably more of a right. I don't know. That's a toss-up in some ways, but C just felt better for me. Did we skip number 6? The last one was 5. There's 5. There's 7. Okay. 6 is the secret one. We won't talk about it. Okay. The healthcare executive with opposing duties. That's a weird phrase. Opposing duties, meaning one of which makes it impossible to meet the other. I'm trying to figure out what does that mean? That's a weird thing. So you've got multiple duties, and if you do one, you can't do the other. Well, yeah, I think that's kind of the definition of conflict of interest. Okay, so A is definitely right. Do you have a management ethical dilemma? Yes, you do, but the dilemma is conflict of interest. So B is correct, but not as good. Need for a consultant? Probably not. Should be able to figure that out. Responsibly protect themselves. Again, yeah, you probably do. If you're in a conflict of interest, you need to declare it and stuff, but it all comes back to the conflict of interest. So I'm going to go with A, as were people in the chat. Great. Number 8. So a non-legitimate reason. So right at the beginning, I'm getting a negative here. So I'm going to look for things that are not legitimate reasons to release patient medical information. Okay, so means that 3 of these are going to be allowed and one of them isn't. Subpoenaed by a court order, that is very legitimate. You got no choice. Requested by the spouse or next of kin, it depends, maybe. Certainly if the person's unconscious, then you're going to talk to the decision maker. So that's a maybe. Patient becomes incompetent. Well, you don't just start releasing information just because they're incompetent. That in itself doesn't do it. Reporting statistics for a research project. Yeah, that's legitimate if you're blinding it. So there's no no patient-specific information, you can do that. So A is legitimate, B is sometimes legitimate, C I think is not, and D is. So I'm going to go with C. Oh, man, really? Well, I'm glad it's not just me, but we had a bunch of different ones in the chat. We had A, we had D, we had C. So I wasn't the only one who didn't get B. Phew. There goes my perfect record. Okay, number 9. See if we can get back on the roll here. Again, remember, you don't need to have a perfect score to pass. So which of the following is not, again, I've got a negative, it's not an example of a breach of fiduciary duties. So when I read that, I kept saying, what do I know about what is a fiduciary duty? Okay, so definition, fiduciary duty is your duty to someone else where you put their interest above yours. You have to do what they need, not what you want. So which of these is not? So a executive who is distracted by personal and or family situation resulting in poor performance. Well, you have a duty to try to do a good job. So that one's not it. An executive whose judgment and effectiveness is impaired due to a substance abuse. Not that that ever happens, but yes, that would definitely be a breach of fiduciary duty. An executive who relies on subordinates to relay appropriate information. Now, great example of reading this carefully, because when you first scan that, I first got inappropriate, right? Then I look at it closely, right? So if you tell one of your staff members to give information to someone and it's appropriate information, nothing wrong with that, right? That's not a breach of anything. So that one definitely looks like the right answer, but checking D, executive who fails to maintain competency. Yes, that is a breach. You are supposed to continue to be competent, which is why you're all here working on this. So I've got a fiduciary, fiduciary, not fiduciary, fiduciary. I'm looking for the one that's not, and I'm going to go with C. Great. Okay. Last one, I think. Oh, this is interesting. So, law and ethics kind of have an overlapping area. The difference being that law is enforceable and ethics isn't. But, when you talk about patient consent, that's both legal and ethical. So this one we got stuck in the ethics one, but it could have found it in the law one as well. So legal aspects of consent include all the following except. So consent. Again, I got a negative here. All except. Okay, well, consent has to be voluntary. It has to be informed. Medically sound. You're consenting to something that hopefully is medically sound, but is the consent medically sound? I don't think so. I'm going to come back on that one. Must be competent. Yeah, the patient has to give competent consent. You've got to be, an adult usually. Can't be in prison. You can't be mentally incompetent. So A, B, and D are definitely parts of the consent process. So even though C, I'm not sure what it means, I think C is the one that jumps out as not being right. So I'm going to go with C. As did everyone who answered in the chat. Excellent. Good. Any questions from anyone?
One thing that we
And
should
restate the 4 areas of focus. Yeah, let's go back up to the top if we could on the areas. So I think that you want to really spend time with the ACG Code of Ethics and the ethics statements. And again, you're not going to memorize the whole Code of Ethics. There's no need to, but if you familiarize yourself with it generally and you know the major areas, I think that will help you if there's a more specific question. But a lot of them seem to be more general principles about what codes of ethics do. They're not going to ask you, what does section Roman numeral 3A4 say? They're not going to ask that. But you do want to be familiar with it enough that you can, talk about it generally. You want to talk about ethics committees, their role. You want to talk about patient rights and responsibilities. And I can't remember what the fourth one was. Does anyone else remember? I can't remember either. But it's on that list. So the list we had at the beginning is from the ACHE website. Oh no, the nurse. Someone's asking about nursing. It was about code of ethics that besides the ACHE code of ethics, you also want to just have a kind of a passing knowledge of American Medical Association, American Nurses Association, just how all codes of ethics are pretty much doing the same type of thing in terms of there it is. So yeah, so they're doing they're doing the same type of thing um, in terms of guiding the behavior. But that's what codes of ethics do. They have some areas that are kind of aspirational. We'll all try to be really good people and do everything possible. And then some are more behavioral. They give you very specific things like, maintain your currency in your field. Right. So you have that range of things, but you find that in pretty much all codes of ethics. Um, I mean, can I share my screen for just a second?
Of course. One thing to everybody
Sure.
like to remember is the law and ethics fallacy. So some of these questions will try to trick you. Just because something is legal, just because something is legal, you shouldn't always equate it to ethical behavior. Or because it's just because something is legal is or immoral because of the legality.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really good point, and something that's worth keeping in mind that um, something can be ethical and still be illegal. Something can be legal and be unethical, and I think we can go back through history and find lots of those. I think we could probably find things going on today, but we won't talk about those. I'm going to share my screen briefly just to give you um, a process for organizing yourself in terms of the legal part. So, um, are you seeing the matrix starting with antitrust?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a trick that I use when I'm trying to organize a lot of information. I love putting things into a matrix, and in the in the video, I divided up the types of laws into big areas. So one way to prepare yourself and to make a quick study guide is start with those 5 areas and then under those put each of the laws. And I identified some. You probably know more, but and then just give yourself some quick information about what it is they do. And that way, one is it helps you pull all the stuff together, but it also helps you differentiate like the Stark 2, Stark 3. um, it helps you identify what each of these laws do. So you can do things like this for each of the 10 areas. I think it works really, really well, particularly for the law stuff. So I would recommend that. And before anyone asks, no, I won't share mine because I think the value is putting it together. The value of learning it is how you assemble it. And that's what really helps you learn it. It's not just looking at the list. Okay. Um, so with this section, yeah, you've got to know a bunch of laws, and there are tons and tons of them. You're not going to know all of them because there are way too many to memorize, but you ought to have an idea of the big ones. Some of these are related to patient rights, such as privacy, some are related to the payers, um, licensing, accreditation, all those things will fit under this as well. But if you can know some of the general principles that come up and then know these specific laws, I think that will be the best thing you can do in terms of your preparation time and being ready to answer the questions. I want to point out that when I teach my healthcare law class, I talk about contracts within that. ACHE does not include contracts under laws. They include it under business. So you will get it, but not today. Questions about contracts. Um, so these are more both liability as well as regulatory programs. Okay, so let's go to the next one. And these are all on the ACHE website, so I don't need to read them to you. You can read them yourself, and we'll look at these questions. Okay, so again, I'm going to try to figure this out. Some of these you just got to know. Either you know it or you don't know it. So federal regulations, and I think regulations is an important thing, that govern clinical laboratory testing. Okay, testing on humans, except clinical trials. I think it's just routine testing is what they're saying. Okay, so the Joint Commission Laboratory, well, Joint Commission is not federal, so that one's false. College of American Pathologists, again, not a federal agency. That one's off. Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments. Well, just by its title, that one sounds, even knowing zero about laboratories, that one sounds pretty good. And then U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So the FDA is a federal agency, but it is not federal regulations. Looking back on the question is looking for the federal regulations. So yeah, I'm going to go with C. And by noticing that word regulation up there, it eliminated two of them because I could eliminate anything that was not federal, and then I could eliminate D because it's not regulation. Under federal law, whenever a patient comes to a hospital emergency department with an emergency condition, and that immediately is ringing bells in my head saying, EMTALA, 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 because that's what it looks like, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. So patient comes to the emergency department with an emergency. Okay, so with few exceptions, the patient's ability to pay may be considered. Well, no, that's the purpose of the act is you can't think about ability to pay in deciding whether to provide treatment. So A is false. With few exceptions, the patient's condition must be stabilized before he or she is transferred or discharged. Absolutely. That is the main part of what EMTALA does. It says you got to do a screening exam, you got to stabilize. So B looks really good, is true. A police officer may be asked to authorize treatment. Nope. Police officers can't authorize treatment anyway, and certainly not under federal law. And the hospital has no duty to treat the person if he or she is not a patient. The answer would be of a member of the medical staff. Well, no. If you present to the emergency department, that creates the obligation, not the prior relationship. So I've got A is false, B is true, C is false, D is false. Going with B, as did a bunch of people in the chat. And B is it. Oh, this one's a trick one. This is a trick question. Okay. What law addresses the practice of dumping indigent patients in a public hospital? So if you haven't heard the phrase dumping, it's when you try to send the patients who don't have money to a different hospital than yours, so you don't have to worry about them not paying you. And we were just talking about EMTALA, right? Emergency Medical Treatment Active Labor Act. That isn't on the list. So let's go through them and try to figure out what are they doing then. Okay. ERISA. ERISA is the most confusing law on the planet. Even the Supreme Court can't figure it out. It's about retirement funds and somewhat health insurance, nothing to do with dumping patients. COBRA, Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. Okay, here's why it's a trick question. EMTALA was enacted as part of one of the COBRAs. So COBRA was a omnibus bill, and means it's got lots of things in it. And one of the things it had back in the 1980s was EMTALA. So B is most likely the right answer. I'm going to look at the others though, just to be sure, but I like B. Parka sounds like a heavy jacket, but they spelled it wrong. I have absolutely no idea what parka is. I think someone told me this last year, but I really don't know the answer. And then Hill-Burton was a federal program back in the 50s and 60s that gave grants to communities to build hospitals and health facilities. It did create an obligation for the hospitals that got the money to treat indigents, but I don't think that's what they're really going to, the practice of dumping. So I'm going to go with B, which looks like the right answer. Oh, and someone gave me PARCA is Patient Access to Responsible Care Act. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to try to remember that one for next time. Thank you. But here the answer is COBRA. Ownership and control of medical records associated with hospital delivered services rests with. So we're looking at medical records and we're looking only at the services delivered in the hospital, right? So medical records in the hospital, who owns them, who controls them? Okay, well, that here we're getting into both federal and state laws. The hospital, yeah, that's probably the best answer right there is A, because whoever creates the records really has the ownership of them. So I like A, but I'm gonna look at the others. Physician, no. Patient has the right to access them, but doesn't own them or control them. And the insurer does not, definitely doesn't. So yeah, I'm going to stick with A. A is the right answer. And that's what people in the chat room said as well. Didn't we just do this like 3 times? The rules governing the acceptance and treatment of emergency patients is known as, oh man, okay. With this, so we've got EMTALA. We talked about that before. That's definitely the right one. EEOC is equal opportunity. No, that one's wrong. Stark 2 is physicians referring patients to an entity that they own or their family owns. So that one's wrong. But now we have both EMTALA and COBRA. And as I said, EMTALA was enacted as part of COBRA. So they're both right, but EMTALA is more specific here. So I've got a true, false, false, true. And the question is, which one is more true? And I think A is more true. And again, people in the chat room are on a roll. They're getting the right answers as well. Okay, a joint venture laboratory. What's with all these laboratory questions? I hate laboratory questions. Okay, I'm just giving you what's going through my brain here. Okay, so a joint venture laboratory owned by hospitals and physicians on its medical staff. Okay, so I'm looking at a joint venture. It doesn't really matter that it's a laboratory, I guess. Owned by hospital and physicians would probably be in violation of fraud and abuse laws if it were to. All right, so now I'm narrowing in. I'm looking at fraud, abuse. At first, I was thinking it was antitrust when they said joint venture, but that's wrong. So I got to get that in my head and look at the fraud abuse laws. Okay, market its services to both investors and non-investors. Well, I can't see anything wrong with that, but it doesn't make sense to say that would be illegal. So A is false. Offer ownership shares at the same price to refers and non-refers. So some doctors refer patients to this lab, others don't, but they're offering the shares of the business, the joint venture, at the same price. Again, I can't think of anything wrong there. Require investors to refer business to it. Well, that one just sets off all sorts of red flags for me, right? And let's go back to Stark. Stark says that a doctor cannot usually refer patients to a business that the doctor owns or their family member owns. So if they're requiring their doctors to do that, it seems like they're requiring their doctors to violate Stark. So C is definitely looking like it could be a violation. You even got me get D. Base its profits on amount of capital contributed, not referrals. So yeah, if you are paying out the share of the profits based on how many patients the doctor referred, that would be a kickback, a violation of the anti-kickback statute. So if you're giving your profits on the amount of capital contributed, just normal stock shares, that would be fine. So A, B, and D are all fine. There's nothing fraudulent about them. It's C that's a fraud. And I think everyone agreed there as well. Next one. In general. Okay, now when it starts out in general, I know that I'm going to have to, look at some gray areas here. So that's kind of an alert to me that I'm not going to get necessarily a clean answer. In general, courts exhibit what attitude regarding controversies over medical staff privileges? So I'm picturing that a doctor got kicked off the medical staff and sued the hospital. What's the court going to do? Human lives are at stake, and the court must intervene to protect physicians' right to save those lives. No, no. I mean, if the doctor is kicked off the medical staff for killing patients, the court's not going to say, too bad, put him back on. If the decision was supported by reasonable evidence, courts will not substitute their judgment for that of the hospital board. Remember that medical staff privileges are granted by the board, not by the medical staff. So if they had evidence to support why they made the decision, I think probably that's a good answer. We'll say B is true. Hospitals must not be permitted to interfere with the doctor-patient relationship. I think I've heard doctors say that, but I don't think courts are going to say that. They do. They certainly do recognize that hospitals do that. And courts may not entertain suits regarding medical staff privileges. No, absolutely wrong. They will definitely do that. So let's see. A is false, C is false, D is false. So yeah, B makes sense. If they've got reasonable evidence, if they use due process, the court is going to say you're good. So I'm going to go with B. And again, looks like the chat room people were going with B. The thrust of antitrust legislation as applied to healthcare field is to. Now, when I talk about antitrust law in my healthcare law and ethics class, my students basically try to go to sleep at the word antitrust. And I find that really disappointing because that's what got me interested in the law. I'm very strange, but I love antitrust law. It's the overlap of economics and law. So kind of fun things for me, but not for most people. So I have to think, what do I know about antitrust? Antitrust is trying to support the marketplace, right? So you try to make the marketplace work well, right? So apply to healthcare field, contain costs. Well, that you might think that, you promote competition and costs might go down, but it also will promote access. It'll promote quality. So A is is true that it is a thrust, but it's not the main one. Contained rising costs of independent single unit hospitals. Huh? Maintain rising costs. Well, I'm not sure that we see a difference that much in there, but antitrust isn't going to do that. They actually are going to promote the competition. Monitor the scope of health services provided in a given area. Well, if a merger was going to cut the scope of services available, that might be one factor, but the agencies that do antitrust stuff, they don't do any monitoring. That's not really it. Protect the public's economic interests. Okay, now that is the broadest of them. All the others are kind of, they're focusing down. D is really broad, but almost by definition, that is what antitrust does for healthcare and others. It's looking at costs, it's looking at quality, it's looking at access. So yeah, I like D. And people in the chat like D as well. Oh, here's a scenario one. Two independent healthcare organizations interested in discussing a joint venture to initiate a cancer treatment program. That doesn't matter. It's that you got two different groups that are talking about a joint venture. Doesn't matter what they're talking about, why, but joint venture would be wise to initially consult with their counsel. So you are going to meet with a different organization. When do you want to talk to your lawyer first? Determine if liability is equal, even though disproportionately owned. Yeah, I don't think so. That's not worth talking about early. Financial gains can be shared unequally. Again, that's saying you negotiate. You don't need your lawyer to tell you if you're allowed to do that. Discussion might violate antitrust statutes. Yeah, so you have two competitors who are talking to each other about something that could be considered a conspiracy in restraint of trade, and that can get you in trouble. It's not that it's absolute. It's not that you can't do it at all. But I think, yeah, talking to your lawyer to make sure you're not doing it wrong makes sense. So I got false, probably true. And then current facilities can accommodate the program. Not a legal issue. Talk to your operations people, talk to your facilities people. Your lawyer does not look at how much room you have in the building to use. So D is false. So yeah, I'm going to go with C. And again, chat room is right on this one. Good. Okay, last one under law. Which of the following is a clear trend? Oh, I hate that. Clear trend means I got to know not just what's happening today, but what's been going on. So regarding hospital liability for actions of its medical staff. So, okay, so respondeat superior, when is the superior responsible? Okay. Historically, hospitals had no liability. They were just the working place providing the room, but there is a trend. So hospital may be held liable for physician's negligence, even though the physician is an independent contractor. Yes, that one could be true. Look again for a clear trend, so there may be more than one here. But yeah, that you know, uh, negligent contracting, negligent hiring are certainly there. So A looks like it could be. Hospitals are not liable for such actions because they're simply physical sites where patients receive treatment. Well, again, that's the historical way of doing it, but that's not true anymore. The trend is away from that. So B's false. Courts are becoming more reluctant to impose liability. Yeah, right. Courts are becoming more reluctant to impose liability on hospitals for the negligence of physicians. Okay, so that's the opposite of A. And if I think A is right, then C becomes false as far as a trend. And the hospital is liable only if the physician's an employee. Well, again, that would be the opposite of A. A is saying You got some liability if for independent contractors. Another example, let's look at the world, not California, because I think 45 states do not have corporate practice of medicine laws. So hospitals are more likely to hire physicians, but you're still liable if the doctor does something and you shouldn't have credentialed that person. So yeah, D's wrong. So we got A is looking good, B is not, B is totally wrong, C is totally wrong, D is very much wrong. So I'm going to go with A. And again, everyone in the chat room did as well. So any questions? Not seeing any. Okay, again, lots of stuff within the law, excuse me, within the law section and the ethics one, but the law one particularly, I think if you find a good way to organize all the information and you can hopefully recognize what laws do. There's some laws that I think everyone knows, EMTALA, HIPAA, et cetera. You're not going to worry about those, but it will come up with some weird things like, um, you know, does anyone know when Medicare, which law was Medicare Advantage? Anyone know the answer on that one? It's what I forget the name, but it's not one that you would automatically think of when you hear about Medicare Advantage. So, there's going to be a little bit of Trivial Pursuit. You're playing with some of the lost names, and if you can organize it and think about all the different things the laws do, I think that will help you when you get one of those weird questions. So
It's got to be multiple choice, Richard. Multiple choice.
multiple choice is really good because again, if you can eliminate two of the four, then when you flip a coin, you got a much better chance if you don't know it. So, work your way through it. And like I've been trying to demonstrate, look for ways you can eliminate your choices instead of looking for the one that you think is right. Okay, go with the one that's left when you've eliminated them. The Sherlock Holmes approach. Okay, well, let me introduce Mary, who's going to finish us up with governance. And Mary is uh, our San Diego rep. She brings the warm weather to our meetings, and she's practice manager for IMED down at UC San Diego Health. She's been involved both ACHE San Diego as well as other chapters, and she's currently a member of their Advancement Study Group Committee. And she's also a lecturer down at San Diego State University and is working on a doctorate in public health.
I am.
You are. So
there's not enough things to do, I guess, Richard.
But
let's get this show on the road. Thank you for that very nice introduction. Okay, here are the governance and organizational structure knowledge areas. I'm not going to go through them this morning, but just a refresher so you know what is covered in this section. I think this section accounts for 12 questions on the test, about 6%. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's jump into a few questions here. And like Richard, I haven't looked at oh no, we already got the answer to number one before we even went through it. Whoops. Don't look at that. Jaime's he's cheating there for us. Okay. I haven't looked at the answers to these questions in quite a while, so I'm going to walk through them similar to what Richard was doing for the previous two topics. So the Finance Committee of the Board of Directors, is responsible for, well, we know the answer is monitoring budget and performance, but let's just look at the other answers just to walk us through here. Awarding CEO increases and bonuses, C is acting on behalf of the board in their absence. And the last option is permitting joint ventures with other corporations. So my tactic is I usually just, before I even start thinking about each answer, I just kind of read through all of them first, just to get a quick blush and to see if there's any that I can just immediately remove or eliminate. And definitely C, immediately eliminate the finance committee acting on behalf of the board in the board's absence. Uh, in my opinion, the answer doesn't even make that much sense. B, awarding CEO increases and bonuses. I don't know if this is specific. This is definitely a function of the board, but with respect to the specific finance committee on the board, no, that wouldn't be my answer. And then the last option, since we know A is the right answer for this question, permitting joint ventures with other corporations. Definitely that answer would be broader than just the finance committee, that decision of a joint venture. And I also like to ask Richard, I know he just went through two or three sections, but I like to play off him to Richard. Any other ideas or feedback on this finance committee of the board? Anything that sticks out of those B through D,
Well,
that why we wouldn't choose them?
one is just having a good idea of the board and the board committees generally.
Yes.
Governance is one of those areas I don't think about a lot because I don't teach it, so therefore I don't worry about it. But you should know what the board does, what the committees do, and where the power is. So um, definitely A jumps out immediately because that's budget, finance. Yeah, those go together easily. But things that require authority or power are not going to be a committee. They're going to be the whole board. So awarding
Yeah,
increases, acting on behalf of the board, permitting, those verbs are saying, no, that requires authority that the committee doesn't have.
exactly. Okay. We go to the next question. Don't give us the answer. Ruin my my section here, Jaime. Yes, thank you. The most critical committee. So I'm honing in on most critical that requires tenured board members is. So tenured experience on the board. They're not going to jump on the board. So we have some people already putting in D as executive committee. So let's look at our options. Audit committee, finance committee, nominating committee, and executive committee. I am going to audit committee and finance committee, most critical committee that requires tenured board members. I don't think that's either A or B. Those would not be the most critical. So I'm narrowing it down to C and D. Um, the executive committee, obviously, there are going to be, in the executive committee, typically the president of the board or the chair of the board, different uh, major high-level positions on the board. But I am actually focusing on the nominating committee as, because the nominating committee, from my perspective, is putting forth, and I could be wrong here, and Richard says it's okay not to get 100%, but when I look at the nominating committee as far as who is going to serve in the future leadership of the board, very important to have people that are very tenured with the board to know who would be the best to serve in in the board's leadership. So it could be a toss-up. I'm thinking 50-50 here. Richard, prove me wrong.
Well, I mean, instinctively, I want to go with D because I'm thinking, okay, the people at the top should be the ones who are there the most. And nominating to me is not intuitive. But when you think about what the nominating committee does, they know the people, they know the needs. You don't get that overnight. So I agree that audit and finance
50-50.
definitely got it because
Let's see. Jaime, tell us what it is.
yeah.
C,
Yeah,
nominating committee.
but I noticed everyone in the chat said D, and
Mm.
I think that could have been, yeah, that one is a tough one because instinctively D looks right, C doesn't. But A and B are easy to eliminate because you could bring in people specifically with those skills. But yeah, I see the argument for C, but it's a tough argument for me.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. The duty of loyalty requires that. Okay, so let's just read through the answers. A board member discloses all of their assets before becoming a board member. A board member belongs to as few healthcare organizations as possible. A board member refrains from conflicts of interest, or a board member serves out his entire team. Okay, so first thing I like to do is eliminate. I'm focusing on getting rid of the answers that I know are not correct right off the board. So to answer this question, you need to have a sense of what is the definition of duty of loyalty as far as the governance of the board. Um, A. So does the duty of loyalty require a board member to disclose all of their assets before becoming a board member? Um, I don't think the number of assets that any individual has one way or another necessarily, except maybe something, and I don't want to give away where I'm leaning, but there may be reasons looking at those assets that could um, violate or be in conflict with the duty of loyalty. But as far as just the fact that you have to disclose all your assets, I'm not thinking that A is the right answer. B, a board member belongs to as few healthcare organizations as possible. No, that's not the loyalty. I can see where maybe someone is honing in on, oh, you can only be loyal to one entity or one organization, but I don't think that that is the situation here with the context that we're looking at duty of loyalty. C, a board member refrains from conflicts of interest. Well, even just putting aside the question, that is something that a board member does when someone becomes a board member, does need to manage and monitor that they avoid or refrain from any conflicts of interest while serving on the board. So C is looking good just because it is true, and it gets into that loyalty where you're not going to have a situation where your loyalty is questioned. Which organization are you loyal to when there's a conflict of interest? And then the last, a board member serves out his or her entire term. That's great. You hope that is the situation, but sometimes it isn't. But I don't think that that necessarily, if somebody has to step down from the board, a violation or against a duty of loyalty. So let's see. We have 4 C's in the text, and I am going to agree with the board member refrains from conflicts of interest. There we go. Yes. Next question. The CEO of a hospital reports to A, the board chair, B, the executive committee of the board, C, the Compensation and Evaluation Committee of the board, or D, the entire board? This one's a pretty straightforward one to me. I don't know how much I'm going to take time to walk through this, but the board chair, the CEO, does not just report to the chair of the board. Again, getting back to looking at board structure, having a familiarity with board structure, committee structure, again, because that gets into the B as a possible answer. That does the CEO only report to the executive committee of the board? So we've gone from just one person to an executive committee to then another committee, compensation and evaluation committee of the board. And then the last answer, the entire board, is what I am going with for answering this. I think is a pretty straightforward, intuitive answer, but again, familiarizing yourself with just the general structure and committee structure of a board will help. And the answer is, Jaime, D. Okay. Going right along. Okay. Regarding the hiring of employees, the board should intimately, it should say intimate, should be intimately involved in which of the following positions? Okay. So, I think focusing on the intimately involved piece in the question is important. All management personnel, all employees within the organization, the CEO, or all clinical personnel. So the first one is that the board just is hiring the management level. The boards are strategic. They are not operational. So right off the bat, the fact that it says regarding the hiring of employees, plural, to me is, as an operational leader, as a big red flag here in this question. And that the board doesn't hire multiple employees. They're not hiring management personnel, and they're certainly not hiring all the employees within the organization. That would turn your board into an operational piece of your organization, operational entity, which is not the board's role within an organization. The CEO, that is where I am leaning. And then just to eliminate any other here, all clinical personnel. I think the all clinical personnel, all management personnel, all employees, one kind of multiple choice tactic, and to be leery, in my opinion, of an answer that says all, always, never, is a red flag and should scrutinize those. And kind of what sticks out to me in this question is that A, B, and D, those answers all start with the word all. So the only one that sticks out differently is the CEO, and just knowing board structure, that is the obvious choice. So we've got consensus, it looks like, in the chat from a few people. Can you reveal? C, there, the CEO. So there we go. Next question. A member of the board of a healthcare organization also serves as the medical director of a competing organization. Which one of these duties of a board is applicable to the situation? We dealt with this question, or at least one of the answers to this question, in a previous question. Let's read through. Duty of care, duty of obedience, business judgment rule, and duty of loyalty. Well, this one, although three of the four answers start with duty of loyalty, I'm going to hone in on C and just see if I can eliminate that business judgment rule. Um, I am not familiar with this rule specifically. I don't know, Richard, if you have any
Yes,
insight on a business judgment rule,
it's
but
basically a
would it?
protection for directors of a company that if they made a decision that turned out to be bad, like they lost money,
Mm,
but it was still good business judgment, then they won't be
they'd be
liable.
protected.
Yeah.
Okay, so that business, thank you for that insight. The business judgment rule does not necessarily pertain to the specific situation we have, is talking about duties of a board. So, duty of care, duty of obedience, or duty of loyalty. And we're talking about competing. I'm honing in on the board member is also a medical director of a competing organization. So that right away um, stands out to me. And competing conflict of interest, this is where I'm leaning, brings us to D, that duty of loyalty that we already previously answered, dealt with conflict of interest. So I am going to focus on D as the correct answer. Duty of care and duty of obedience. Just from a layman, just I'm not a governance, I don't serve in a governance role day to day. I have been on some boards of nonprofit organizations in the past, but uh, competing, the question of what is at stake here when you have someone who's on your board but is also serves in a role in a competing organization, um, not not thinking that duty of care or duty of obedience, which I'm not sure, I haven't heard of that one before. I don't know if Richard's heard of that one before, but I'm going with D, duty of loyalty, just from our previous conversation, and it looks like we've got some consensus. Any last thoughts, Richard, before we
Well,
reveal the answer?
I keep thinking duty of obedience is uh, a Catholic priest, for example, takes a vow of obedience, and that's the only one that comes to mind when I see that. So, um,
I haven't heard of it in
yeah, not in this sense.
healthcare
So, yeah, I would go duty of loyalty because
board governance.
that's where your conflict is. Are you loyal to this organization or to the other one? So, um, uh,
We have to, it says here, then what? Regardless of the answer, is this a situation that exists?
oh yeah,
Oh, I definitely think
sure.
this is a situation that can exist.
Yeah,
And if
so I
somebody
mean,
has a, yeah, go
I
ahead,
was thinking
Richard.
medical staff member who's on the board of or one of the owners and people running a practice that is competing with the hospital, but is also a member of the hospital medical staff. If that person's put on your board, then you have a conflict.
Yes. Want to avoid all those conflicts.
Yeah.
Okay, D. Let's go on to the next question. 7. The danger of having a large board, and this question defines a large board as greater than 17 people, is the board can never have a quorum. Right off the bat, I don't like that word never. Let's go on, read all the answers. The board will not be able to elect a chairperson if it's a large board. C, there will be too many committees. I don't know if having too many committees is necessarily a danger, but I'm continuing to go. The executive committee will make all of the important decisions. So, um, going back to those that I'm going to eliminate, I a board having a large board never have a quorum. I don't think that that word never is going to fit the answer and is going to eliminate A. We have already some D's popping up, but let's me go through here. The board will not be able to elect a chairperson. Just because you have a large board, I'm not seeing the danger or the fear that just because you have greater than 17 people that you won't be able to elect a chairperson. I've already said too many committees, not necessarily seeing that as a danger or a bad thing to have the ability to have more mini committees. I shouldn't say more, many. So D seems to me the executive committee will make all of the important decisions. And when just think about a large group, and when you are trying to building consensus amongst a large group is harder to do. I think that is a general understanding that can be a challenge and or a danger. And so therefore, if you have that situation where it's very, very difficult to build consensus on your board, then yes, you will be deferring to the executive committee to make important decisions because it'll just be too challenging on such a large board to build that consensus for the decisions. Any thoughts, Richard? D? D feels like a not great answer because of the word all.
Yeah, I mean,
That is true.
that is definitely an issue. Like you were saying, always, never is always a red flag, and you never want to do an always. But the quorum one was the one I was leaning towards, and then I realized, well, wait a minute, it's a percentage, so you have more people missing, but you also have more people there, so that won't be it. So by eliminating, and I agree with you, B and C are definitely wrong answers. So eliminating A, B, C, D has to be it, but I don't know.
I think, yeah.
It wasn't an
To
easy one.
address the Exactly. To address the word all, I think that if the answer said the executive committee will make all of the decisions and didn't have that word important, that would be a bigger red flag to me. But here it's just honing in on important decisions. We don't really know the definition that they're using here for important, but it is the way the answer is worded in my mind, it is narrowing the focus just a little as far as maybe those critical decisions are important. So yes, it definitely would raise a red flag. I agree with that word all. Sometimes you are gonna just be faced with picking maybe the best of the so-so answers. Like it can happen in that you're like, I don't like any of these answers, but which is the one that um is probably the best of these possibilities or those selections. I don't know, Richard, if you've got some more oh, we've got here. I agree with Michelle that this is a tough one. You have to look for the best, even though none are that great. And yes, that was
I was
better
typing that as you were saying
better
it.
articulated than how I was trying to say it. Thank you, Richard. And then we have Teresa adding in here large boards with so many people to come to a decision ultimately take too long and defer to functional efficiently authority and decision making often shift to a smaller group like the executive committee. So thank you, Teresa, for that insight. Okay, let's go on. I don't know how many more we have, but let's continue on. Which of the following should be included in an organization's mission statement? So now we're getting into a little bit out of the governance and into the more organizational structure. So our answers available to us are ethics, services, strategies, and facilities. So you need to know the mission statement is that's what an organization is doing. That's their mission. A vision, which they usually coupled together, mission and vision. Vision is more like what the organization wants to be, whereas the mission is like what the core that they're doing. So should be included, so that in the question I'm focusing in on that word should. So basically the answer you're going to select should be in a mission statement, not as maybe a nice to have in a mission statement. So ethics, services, strategies, or facilities. To me, strategies maybe is more of like uh, not something you would have in your mission statement. Maybe you might allude to it in your vision, but even there, I would cancel out strategies. Um, Facilities, not typical that an organization is listing their facilities in their mission statement. Um, Facilities are, I don't think of a facility when I think of what is the core thing that this organization does, which is what a mission statement reflects. So when you get here to ethics and services, um, I've seen ethics more listed in organizations that, in addition to their mission and vision, they also list their core values, which refer to, what their values are, what their ethics are. So B, services are something that is done. I think it just falls very easily into answering this question 8. And it looks like we've got some consensus in the chat. So Jaime, what's the answer? B. There we go. And again, organizational structure, yes, no. And the core tenets of, what's a mission statement, what's a vision statement, what are the typical tenets of these things that really organize an organization's structure. Okay, 9. The process of validating a professional's eligibility for medical staff membership and/or privileges to be granted on the basis of academic preparation, so basically your education, licensing, training, certifications, and performance. So we're looking for, and this is basically, the question is basically giving us a definition, and we need to pick from the list below what is the question basically defining. So is it defining privileging? Is it defining verification process? Is it defining credentialing? Or is it defining education authentication? We've got some people out of the gate here that are saying it's C, credentialing. The process of validating, what it's describing to me is what I commonly referred to is medical staff credentialing. Privileges, I think the credentialing process awards you or gives you privileges. So privileging is the process. I would almost like stick the word in there, the answer in there, to see if it makes sense. Privileging is the process of validating a professional's eligibility, et cetera, et cetera. I think privileging or privileges are the result. Verification process, a definition, here we have process twice. So you have verification process is the process of validating a professional's, et cetera, et cetera. And same thing with privileges. It says here privileges to be granted. So going back to A, I think that A and B are not the best answers because they just seem like they're just pulling out words from the definition. that's already in the definition and unlikely to be, what this statement is defining. So I've already said C, I'm leaning to C, so I'm going to skip to D, education authentication. Well, the definition here, the process of validating the eligibility for medical staff membership, um, it does list there that the process reviews academic preparation, which would include your education authentication or training, things like that. But that's just a piece of this. It's not everything that's included there. So when I stick education authentication is the process of validating a professional's eligibility, et cetera, it doesn't seem to fit. Credentialing, though, and just from my knowledge of being in healthcare, credentialing, I would say, is the correct response, and the question or the statement does really define the credentialing process. Yeah. So Teresa said, knowing that credentialing comes first and then privileging, which is the outcome of the credentialing process, helped her select credentialing. Any other thoughts, Richard, before we move on to I think it might be the last question.
Yeah, no, I think Teresa really nailed it there, is that privileging is the end result of someone having privileges to your hospital, but you got to do it. Uh, the education was the other one that I was thinking of, was in that list on the basis of academic preparation, licensing, training. The education's one part of it, so it couldn't be the right answer because it doesn't include
Exactly.
everything.
So Jaime, what do we have here? And I'm being mindful of the time. C, credentialing. Um, and she says she has insider knowledge because her husband is a physician. And I like how she said we just went through that process. So Teresa, thank you for helping your husband with that. It is quite an extensive process and usually takes months to happen at a institution. I know this, I bring on new physicians to my practice, and we always have to go through this credentialing process, which is quite lengthy. Okay, back to the mission statement of a healthcare organization should specify which three things. Okay, lists that are go in order. Here we go. So when I'm looking at these lists that have probably similar things listed in the same answer, but in different order, um, uh, you know, I'm also looking for, do I have two things that have the exact same answers, but in a different order? I don't think this answer actually has that going on. So that's a little bit of a help. Okay, three things here: long range plans, accreditation bodies, and profit margin. Going back to the mission statement. So as we discussed previously, mission statements focus on the services that the organization provides. So service. A does not list anything really about the services being provided. B, community to be served, scope of service, and financial constraints, a possibility. I like that it's got service and to be served in there. So that sounds like a viable option. C, joint ventures, employee satisfaction rating, and scope of service. Well, the one thing that sticks out to me as easy to eliminate in C is employee satisfaction rating. Well, these ratings, employees, patients, they change. They can change week to week. So a mission statement is like something consistent that your organization does. Can your organization change what the services they provide? Yes, but Usually it's not, on a something that's going to be changing up every year, every month. So I don't think an employee section satisfaction rating would be included in a mission statement for that reason. And so I'm C is one that I'm thinking would easily be eliminated. D, long range plans, joint ventures, and again, employee satisfaction rating. Same reason I would eliminate C, I'd eliminate D. So now I'm looking back at A and B. A, we already talked about how that really doesn't fit. And profit margin, I mean, your profit margin again can change year to year too. So B, community to be served by the services that you provide, and financial constraints, like if the organization does have limited resources or things like that, that can also be listed in their mission statement. So it looks like we're going with B. Okay, B. There we go. Is that the last question? Yeah. And we've got 5 minutes for today. I think today was 10 to 11:30, Richard, or do we have more time?
Actually, we have more time if you want to do some of the other practice questions. But I have a question for you first. Um,
Yes.
if you were starting now to take the test, and I know you're grateful that you're not, but if you were, how would you prepare for this section?
For governance and organizational structures,
Yeah.
um, I think familiarizing, like we talked about, familiarizing yourself with in general the core components of board makeup. I really liked how you said to look when it comes to boards on the authority and power aspect of boards and to understand that dynamic. With organizational structure, um, I mean, I think this these questions that we had for organizational structure, as far as like your mission, vision, values, um, you know, I would familiarize myself with, in general, again, how those things are developed within an organization. What are their, we had questions here that said should include this, should include this. So looking at it from that perspective, I'm trying to think of other resources that I would review for organizational structure.
So one thing
Mm.
that comes to mind for me
The
is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
the privileging the physician component because we're in healthcare. Because, lots of organizations, not healthcare, have mission, vision, and values. But when it comes to the relationship to physicians and how they are employed or not employed, how they're um, engaged with the organization and how that's structured, that's something I would also familiarize myself with. Anything else? I don't know.
Yeah, my thought
Richard, anything comes to
was
mind?
also the idea of the Trinity, um, the
Mm,
the board chair, the CEO, and the head of the medical staff have different but somewhat overlapping powers or responsibilities. So one way of organizing might be, and I think this is getting to what you were saying about medical staff, is say, okay, I should know what are the powers and what are the limits on each of those three. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that it's not the medical staff that approves privileges. It's the governing board, right? So,
yes.
knowing that I think is a good thing. So it might be a way of organizing yourself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, the other thing, and I've said this to the students, is whenever you see anything about absolute authority or your final authority or anything else, the answer is always automatically the governing board, right? Because they have the ultimate responsibility for everything that goes on in that organization.
Here's an example of the best mission statement from Kaiser, of course. You're a Kaiser fan. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. Yes. So
Can I
basically,
could I throw that
yes.
same question out to everyone else? What are you coming up with for preparation? Any tools or anything, any tricks you could share of what
For
you're
this
doing
specific topic or just in
for
general?
in general? Yeah.
Oh. Mm.
And if you don't have it now, think about it, and maybe next week we'll ask that again to see if anyone has tricks of this that they could share with us. Cool.
Collaboration with other fellows in our organization using Quizlet.
Yeah.
Nobody said AI yet. We were talking about if you are focusing on AI, it's almost as just as much effort to make sure that AI is giving you the correct answer.
Okay, I want to hear from Michelle more, and maybe you can turn your microphone on. I use ChatGPT to do exam simulation. So how are you doing it, and what are you getting from that?
Well, I'm the one that did not pass the first time, so I told you guys last time. So um I how did I do that? So first I gave it very specific scenarios, like so one of your examples was like know the code of ethics. And so I asked it to give me, like when I was starting to study, I asked it to give me some basic easy questions, like give me 50 easy questions to go through.
Yeah.
And then the next time I asked it to give me trap questions. And then the next time I asked it to give me scenario based, because I wasn't sure what was going to be on the exam. So I
Mhm.
asked it to give me scenario based questions. And then I would say, give me true false. So I asked it to do it a bunch of different ways. And so it would just go through and give me the simulation. And it was fairly spot on. I mean, it didn't pass. I'm not exactly recommending that be the only study tool. But like now I'm using the well-managed healthcare, reading that and using my flashcards. I think my flashcards were more helpful, but I think I said that um in the last one, the last time we met. But yeah, with chat, it's funny because I told it that I failed. And it said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry for you." And so what
You're so empathetic.
it was really empathetic. I call him my boyfriend. And so I don't know why I think Chad is a he, but he is in my mind. So he gave me some better tips this time around. Um, of when I got through reading the well-managed healthcare organization to anything I had highlighted or written in the set in the like in the margins of my book to put those things into, which were the key terms or things I wanted to study on, because I obviously know my areas where I was weak, which this was one of them. Today was probably one of the bigger ones that I was weak in, which was funny because they were the lower ones, but the lower ones killed me. So don't dismiss the ones that are lower percentage, because those are the ones where I got the bad scores. I did great on the ones where there were the most answer or the highest amount of questions on the test. So I haven't done it again yet. I have my retake is December 6th, and so I haven't used chat again this time around, but I'm just right now reading. But it was good. I liked the simulation. And if you're like trying to like time it, you can have it ask you from all 10 knowledge areas, and um, you can kind of time how you take the test. So if you get nothing else out of that, at least you know what your timing looks like for taking all 230 questions, even though there's 200 scored, you ask it for all 200 or all 230, excuse me.
I really like that only or mainly because there's a real lack of practice questions for this exam.
Yeah.
And when I did the California bar exam many years ago, there were literally thousands of practice questions available, and I think I did them all. So then when I got ready to take this test, it was really frustrating not having a lot of them. And ACHE used to offer more than they do now. One thing I want to mention is, and I'll put this information in the chat because it's not going to show up this way, but looking for something else one day, I ran into unofficial practice questions for the FACHE exam, updated August 2024, and it's available on Amazon. I'll put this into the chat in a second. It is not ACHE. It is definitely unofficial. Um, it's kind of weird how they have it organized, the answers on the page. I wish it was on the next page or something. But by looking through this, they look like decent questions, and the answers I felt confident with. So if you're looking for just additional practice, I would recommend this.
I
Uh,
use that book. I have that exact. I can see the color of it that is on there, and I did buy that off of Amazon too. For me, just preparation. I said this last time is I think I studied right up until the minute of the exam. I worked right up until the, last hour of the exam. I did not sleep well the night before, and I had a lot of personal stuff going on. And I think I was just overall just generally unprepared and not in the right mindset to take the test the day I did. Um, and I just barely sunk under in some of those in those low question where there was only 6 or 9 questions. Those are the ones that killed me. So however ACHE does their formula in the back end, I did great on 5, which all had the most questions, and I got under the 65% threshold on the ones that had little, and I would get like 63% or 62%. I mean, they were just barely, it was like heartbreaking.
the good news is that it's the total that counts. It's not, you don't have to pass each of the areas.
Yeah, however it works, I don't think I missed by a lot, but who knows?
Um, I just put the Amazon link in as well.
Right.
Um, so yeah, the you want to be careful with some of the Quizlet ones. Some are better than others, but it just depends who put them up there. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. But I kind of like the creativity there of trying to use ChatGPT. Uh,
Yeah, and somebody asked me, was I concerned about the answers being correct or not? And yeah, I was. There was some I definitely went back to and tried to look up, but a lot of them matched my flashcards.
hmm.
So, like if you were gonna really cram, I would say your flashcards are a really, really, really good source.
So mentioned well-managed healthcare organizations, and I will say that again and again, that is the single best resource. If you don't have anything else, then grab that one. Um, by coincidence, the one area it doesn't cover well is law and ethics, but everything else it does a great job on. So if you're only buying one book, get that one. But think about the areas that you feel comfortable with and the ones you don't. And you can find a book on governance if you need it. There's ACHE has those in their Health Administration Press. Um, Finance is one, of course, a lot of us need. Quality. If you're not doing it day to day, you're more likely to need extra on that. If you deal with something all the time, then you don't worry about it as much. But think about what areas you want to concentrate your prep on.
Good advice, Richard.
Mary, you want to do a few more practice questions, or okay?
We can. I'm game if
No, we
people
said we
want
were going to
to.
go till noon, so why don't we go for another 20 minutes if
Okay.
people want to bear with us? We're losing a few people, but it's okay.
Alrighty, let me get that ready. I'll pull them up in just 1 second.
The people who left early, if they don't pass, now we know why. It's because they left early.
We'll trace it back to that October 18th session.
It all comes back to that.
Yeah.
On the bright
Oh,
side, they should listen to the recording once we publish it, so they'll still get the access to the question.
Yeah.
we'll still get the access. Okay, let's go on. Let's see to a question we got here. I don't know if these are all yeah, okay. An expansion of an organization's mission that expresses intentions, philosophy, and organizational self-image. A, vision, B, code of conduct, excuse me, C, purpose, or D, values. Let's see. Expansion expresses intentions. Intentions sound to me like vision. Philosophy and organizational self-image do not sound at all like a code of conduct. So I'm going to eliminate code of conduct. Purpose, I think, really goes back to your mission. So I'm not, I don't really think of the purpose as being an expansion of the organization's mission. I think the purpose of an organization will be in the mission. We've got some saying A and some saying D, values. Do values really include the intentions? Organization. I'm gonna go with, I could be wrong here. I'm gonna go with vision because I think of like your intentions of what you want to be, what you want to do in the future, like organizational self-image, like how you see yourself.
I want to argue differently before we put the answer up.
You're gonna argue differently? Good. I
Yeah,
love it.
which is philosophy and values linked to me the same way intentions and
Oh,
vision did for you.
true.
So definitely we can
And it
eliminate.
says organizations. You could change my mind. Should we go with D?
I don't
We
know. I
have some
mean,
people,
it's
we
mixed
have
in
our
the chat
split.
room. Yeah, it's about half and half in the chat room as well. So I think we're in flip a coin territory here.
Maybe it is D. Philosophy. I like that
I don't know.
idea.
Let's
Like
let's
when you
find
think of
out.
a philosophy as your values.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
A. I should have
Okay. This is a standard thing about multiple choice questions. They always say go
talk
with your
yourself out
first
of the right
reaction.
answer.
They say when you change it, you're more likely to change from right to wrong than from wrong to right. So I don't know if that's true or not, but if you were locked in, Mary, don't let me change your mind.
Okay, Richard. Comments of external auditors to the governing board that accompany their audited financial report in the form of unqualified comments, management letter, a disclaimer comment, or executive summary. So we're looking at something that comes with the audited financial report. So I mean, management letter and executive summary. I think maybe your executive summary would be part of your report. So I'm looking at A or C. We've got someone who says it's a management letter. They
I'm,
probably know
I'm going
more
to go
than me.
D because it's comments to the governing board, right? So that's why I'm eliminating D. Um, a disclaimer is when you have I forget the phrase,
Yeah,
you say your books are
right.
really bad and we refuse to say they're good. Um, I think it's B.
Management letter,
Yeah,
comments of externals to the governing board.
yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Did you change
We're
your mind
gonna
again? Don't do that.
B. There you go. Unqualified comment. Yeah, just sounds kind of strange to begin with too, as well. I didn't get there. But B. Yay. Teresa's yay. She got it right. Okay. A group of agenda items passed without discussion unless a member requests a review used to focus attention on priority matters. Okay, I know what this is, but I'm going to walk through the answers. Consent agenda, format agenda, ad hoc agenda or review agenda. So the there's actually a passed without discussion. So don't think format agenda is really fits the definition here, and used to focus attention on priority matters. Ad hoc is like add-on. That the definition of something that's ad hoc does not actually fit this definition either. Review agenda, consent agenda, I would say those two would be naturally what I would narrow the answers down. Now, I just know from my experience, the answer is A. But I think consent, why it's A is because that's like consenting to something. So when I think of something that's passed, then you're giving consent. That's my thinking. May not too flawed, or I'm trying to explain something that it's harder to explain something that you already know is the answer just by way of experience. But if I'm looking at the answer, and then used to focus attention on priority matters. So what they're basically saying here is that you have these agenda items that you're consenting to in order to give yourself time to focus the meeting on the items that are of priority. So the answer is A. I don't know if anybody's got, Michelle says this one was on her test. Anybody have any other logic to describe why A is the answer? Jaime, you put it up there just so we can confirm it. Yeah, it's A. Helping board streamline meetings, proving routine items was my logic for it. Yes, unless someone asked to pull out for discussion. Yes. So, okay, that is a consent agenda. I wish we did it more often in healthcare. Okay. Decisions permanently vested in the central corporation of a multi-corporate system. So decisions permanently vested. Okay, the answers are reserved powers, delegated authority, implied powers, and chain of command. I'm going to eliminate B, delegated authority, because it's talking about decisions that are permanently vested, like within the center of the corporation. So as we know what delegation is, that's just counter to what it's saying here. We've got someone saying they're for reserved powers. Yeah, I would narrow this one down. Chain of command, that doesn't even, we know what a chain of command is, where um you can go up or down the chain of command as far as making decisions, but permanently vested in the central corporation, I wouldn't say that really has much to do with the chain of command. So I'm really looking at decisions. When people make decisions, that means they have power. So I'm going to, again, narrow it to A and C. And so it's either reserved or implied. Implied between the two, permanently vested. And when something's permanently vested, it doesn't sound like that's something that's just implied. It sounds just more purposeful, more called out. So I am going to go with reserve powers, because when I think of a reserve power, it's like you're setting that aside, you're reserving that. And so that goes straight hand in hand with the permanently vested in the central corporation. And we had Teresa that guessed that. Any comments, Richard, on this one?
No, I was
Nope.
doing the same type of elimination, and
Logic of thinking.
yeah, that
Okay.
delegated seemed like it was the opposite, so that was the easiest one to get rid of.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Do we have a next question? Which of the following is not a standard function of board chairs? So you're looking, so one of the four is not true. So let's see, when we're thinking of board chairs, cultivate an effective working relationship with the CEO. Well, since the CEO reports to the board, as we covered previously in this session, yeah, that seems that that would be a standard function. Mentor others on the board, um, definitely desired if it's not standard. Command and control the board. So this is board chairs. So plural. So command and control the board. I'm envisioning all the board chairs trying to command and control each other. So I'm leaning towards a C, walk the straight and narrow. This one seems like an odd one, but if you're on a board, I think you should be on the straight and narrow. It kind of seems cliche-ish, but I still go back to C. Like I just don't even know how all the board chairs could have a standard function of command and control of the entire board. I could be wrong.
I,
Any
I,
thoughts, Richard?
I think you're right because I think it should not be board chairs. I think it's board chair, the one person I think they're looking at because a board only has one.
Oh, it might
But
be
but
a
but even
typo.
so, I mean, if you're on a board and the board chair is making all the decisions and telling everyone else what to do, I'm going to quit that board. So,
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
that's
so we're
definitely
going
not
with
fun.
C is the wrong, is not a standard function.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Let's
agree with
see.
Teresa that
Yes.
influence and facilitating is good, command and control is bad. And those are the key words. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, next.
I will say though that my instinctive leadership style is command. I just never get to do it, but God, the times I've been in that position, I loved it.
Okay, professional and ethics.
Okay,
Do you want to take this one over?
sure.
You got a few more
So,
minutes left.
okay, so duty of health management consultant. So that's interesting. Not the executive, but the consultant to avoid conflict of interest and self-dealing. Okay, so we know we have a duty to avoid conflicts. We know we have a duty to avoid self-dealing. So those are going to come under one of these. So duty of good faith, I don't know what that is. Duty of loyalty for sure. Confidentiality is not those two, it's other stuff. It's not just conflicts and self-dealing. And duty of care. Duty of care is your duty to do a good job, but that's not really those either. So I'm going to go with duty of loyalty, B.
Which talks about, oh,
Oh,
it's
oh,
A.
oh, really?
Good
Okay, well,
faith.
I'm going home then. I give up. That's too, I messed up.
You can't miss one. Good faith, duty of good faith to avoid when you're a consultant, I don't know if anybody's been a consultant. Sometimes there can be situations where when you're in your if you're working for like an organization and that consulting company is doing, providing service for competing companies. And so maybe that, that duty of good faith is here where that situation, because I know that I was a consultant and that was always like, okay, when we took on a new client, what we were going to do for that client, looking to, who's doing what, is there separation you wouldn't want the same consultant working with one client who was a competitor of another client uh, on the same topic or the same request. So
That still sounds like duty of loyalty to me.
it does, but
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't know,
know.
does anybody know the definition of good duty of good faith? I don't know. Okay. Well, let's go on to the next
Let's do
one.
another one.
Yeah, one more. We probably have time
Oh,
for one
yeah.
more.
All right. So 40-year study, 600 African American men that are misinformed its subjects and prevent treatment. This is one of the type that either you know it or you don't know it, right?
I
And,
know.
if you don't know it's Tuskegee
Yeah.
study, then you should know it. So that's one of the things that in healthcare ethics, is one of our really bad examples of things that we've done wrong in this country. So Tuskegee study is the answer. Go to the next one. I think we have room for maybe two, three more.
Okay.
Legal document that specifies a person's preference for treatment, self-sustaining technology or life-sustaining technology, other medical care, okay, written before and used after the person incapacitated. So informed consent is you giving consent at the time. Power of attorney, we have a power of attorney for healthcare, but not power of attorney generally doing this. But the power of attorney for healthcare is part of the advanced directive. So C looks right. Patient rights is not a document. So that one's wrong. So B and C are both kind of right, but C is more right.
Yeah. Advanced care planning, advanced care directive. Yeah.
And Michelle says this one was on the test as well. So, okay.
She's got it.
Ethical principle of refraining from actions that could harm others. And
Jesus.
my students get really confused between maleficence or non-maleficence and beneficence, because beneficence is your duty to do good, non-maleficence is your duty to not do bad, right? So I spend a lot of time trying to tell them which is which. So
I can't even pronounce these words. I have a hard time.
it is non-maleficence, and that is your duty to not do bad things. So in healthcare, you hear the phrase primum non nocere, first do no harm, and that comes out of non-maleficence. So I'm going to go with D. Yep. The people was the people saying C for this one, or was that the last one? I think
I
that was
don't
right.
know.
Yeah.
Negligence.
Okay. Yeah. Negligence is totally different. Okay. So, oh God. Um, An ethical decision-making approach that relies on a case's facts, complexity, relevant laws, unusual circumstances to determine a judgment on that case. So,
I know
okay,
what this
so
is.
yeah, I think I do. I'm going to hold on A for a second. Sarbanes-Oxley, of course, is accounting laws, in which responsible. We get rid of that one. Um, um, Fidelity isn't an approach, it's a principle. Utilitarianism is an approach, but that's the one that probably more people know than anything about the greatest good for the greatest number. So even if I have absolutely no idea what casuistry is, um, I can eliminate the other three pretty easily, right? So a good example of how you don't necessarily need to know everything if you can eliminate the wrong ones. And you probably can identify those more easily than the right ones sometimes. So I'm pretty sure it's A. Watch me be wrong. Okay. Yeah,
Nope. You
it
got
is.
it right.
I've used up my quota of wrong answers today.
You have one.
Okay, you guys think you have time for one more?
Well, why don't we just throw it out? Does anyone have any questions, anything that you want to know from us?
And we got 2 more minutes.
Hi, good afternoon. I just have a quick question because I noticed you mentioned earlier that the well-managed healthcare organization text is like one of the best resources to use to prep for the exam. And I have a really old edition. I think it's like the seventh edition. And I noticed that it's been updated. There's eighth edition, and I believe the ninth, if it hasn't come out yet, it's about to come out. And so I wanted to know if you know whether or not there's a huge difference in the ones that have been updated, and if you would advise that, we all get like a most recent edition, depending on when you're scheduled to take the exam.
I don't know. I've not done a, side by side comparison type thing, but
Okay,
I can't imagine there were that many significant changes from edition to edition to get a whole new version at what, $150 a book or something.
exactly.
So I think if I had the
Ask ChatGPT
yeah,
to compare.
Ah, great
there you
idea.
go. I like that.
Okay, thank
But I
you.
think I think if I had the previous version, I'd be okay. If I had two versions ago, then I might say maybe I need the newer one. Which
Great,
one do
thank
we
you.
have in our no one else here from Cal? Which one do we have in our library that we send out to people? I think it's the seventh. So yeah, well, I think you're okay.
Yeah, if they haven't come out with the ninth yet, I think you're probably fine. And like I said, I would just query that in AI to see if, it'll tell you the major differences between the two editions.
Okay, thank you.
And also the test is not updated like
Yeah.
immediately.
Right. Well, that is a really, really good point. That if there's something that is going on today and it's a really hot topic, they may start writing test questions. Remember, there's the extra 30 questions for them to test it, but it's not going to end up on the real test for another year or 2 years.
Agree.
So there is that lag. Good point. Well, we are at noon. So
Woo-hoo.
thank you for those of you who stuck around. Um, Feel
Yes.
free to get hold of us if you have any problems, any questions.